Terry Jones of Monty Python is no more. He has ceased to be. He has expired and gone to meet Dr. Chapman. Bereft of life, he rests in peace. He's a stiff. If he was any deader, he'd be pushing up the daisies. His metabolic processes are of interest only to Victorians. He is an ex-Python. To put it more plainly, Terry Jones has sadly passed on. As a fan of Monty Python, I was expecting this, and when it finally was announced at the end of January that he had passed on, I wasn't surprised, because the last couple of years his health had been failing, and dementia is no laughing matter, whether you have it for a short period of time, long period of time. It's a way you would not want to go, especially when you were part of a group that is known for influencing comedy the way Monty Python was. And Jones just slowly going downhill ever since their last little reunion show, which, just from what we see in the recording that they did and released, I didn't really notice any missteps in Terry Jones's performance, but from what I've read, the other shows, you could kind of tell there was a little bit of misgiving. There's a little bit of errors in his performance, forgetting lines. Some of it you could kind of attribute to Python being Python when they do their live performances and add a couple little things, try to make the others laugh. But it's his dementia. For someone who's been a fan of Monty Python for a long time, it might surprise some of you to hear that Jones is not really one of the ones that sticks out to me from a super nostalgic perspective. The ones that do that are like some of you around my age would be Idol and Cleese, and that's for obvious reasons. They were both in films that were targeted at my demographic growing up. Idol, of course, was in Casper, whereas John Cleese was in the Jungle Book remake from the 90s. Of course, he played R and then Q in the Bond films of that era. Voice in The Swan Princess. And then, of course, finding out about their other works later on, but those ones, like the introductory Pythons, then later when I started to watch Monty Python proper, starting with the films, I was introduced to the rest of the cast. And Jones, he co-directed the first Monty Python film, and Monty Python and the Holy Grail. He co-directed it with Gilliam, and Jones was the more comedy director, whereas Gilliam was obviously the more artsy director. And that's the reason why with the later films, Jones did sole direction. And I think that's, at least in my perspective, why I think as a whole, the next two films are better. While Life of Brian is obviously more of a coherent, cohesive film, and Meaning of Life is essentially just a glorified, long episode of the show, just all the gags revolving around life in different stages to go with, title, The Meaning of Life. With the first film, there's a lot of funny bits there, but you can kind of tell there were two directors in there at times. But I will say that does go to that film's benefit, because you get the humor from Jones's direction, and then for the grandeur and wonder, which is befitting of an Arthurian adaptation, you get the wonder and awe from Gilliam. When it comes to sketches on the show proper, the only ones that really come to mind are the gangs of old ladies beating up young men in the streets, which of course has more of a collaborative group one. But the other one that jumps to mind is, of course, one that's very quotable, even though he's not the one saying the line. He plays more of the straight man in that one, and that is, of course, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, know what I mean, say no more. Just the chemistry him and Idol have in that scene, and how Jones is looking at him like, what are you insinuating? Until the end punchline, what's it like? And of course, more so from the live performances of it, the albatross, just the way he interacts with Cleese on that one. And of course, with the way they did it in the more recent live performance, because Chapman is no longer with us, and he has to take over the Colonel's bit of dialogue involving Cleese's character not being a proper woman. Everything's got a flavor. Short glasses, please. And the funny thing, of course, is when the live performances, they always, at least with the last one, they segued those two performances into one. When it comes to the Monty Python films, Jones has a lot more moments and characters that stick out in my mind. With Holy Grail, he has two. Sir Bedivere, the Wise, the brains of King Arthur's Knights of the Round Table, and of course, introduced in one of the most quotable moments in that whole movie. I mean, there's a lot of quotable moments in that movie, but for me, it's one of the most quotable ones. How do you know she's a witch? She turned me into a newt. If she weighs the same as a duck, just the way Sir Bedivere, the voice he gave Sir Bedivere, the way he enunciates his lines, and even though this is from the writing standpoint, the character's logic and how to tell if the woman who played in that scene, of course, by John Cleese's first ex-wife, which I didn't know that until later on, just the logic of it all, it's like, that's weird, but it's medievalist logic, and it fits with the tone of the story, especially if you know anything about the Arthurian legend. Of course, goes with the punchline, "'Tis a fair cop." That's why he's Sir Bedivere the Wise. And, of course, the witch weighs the same as a duck. And, of course, later he plays Prince Herbert in the voice he gives that character to. "But father..." And that whole little gag about the prince trying to sing, and then, no singing while I'm here. Of course, that goes into the whole other gag involving Sir Lancelot, which, if you know anything about how Lancelot is in the Arthurian legend, of course, Lancelot started as a glorified Arthurian fanfic insert character from later Arthurian legend writers. That's putting it into modern connotation and perspective. That's essentially what Lancelot was, which is why he was so badass in a lot of the later Arthurian legends. But getting back on topic, just the whole thing with Herbert, him wanting to be rescued, and Lancelot thinking it's a princess and not a prince, and that whole gag there. And then what happens with his character. I know in Spamalot they actually make him and Lancelot gay, which, having not watched Spamalot, I don't know how that little plot point flows together, but I can see the crux and beginnings of it in the film itself, and why they decided to go in that direction, because it completes that joke a little bit, but without having watched Spamalot, it's kind of hard for me to say how natural it flows. And then, of course, with Life of Brian, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, hint, hint, the character he's mainly known for is Brian's mother, who she has one of the best lines in the whole movie. "He is not the Messiah, he's a very naughty boy." His chemistry with Chapman in that film, you really believe they are mother and son, even though it's kind of done as a comedic sense. And just the whole back and forth. And Jones is one of my favorite moments when he sees the woman that Brian has slept with. She's still naked. There's just the look on Jones's face as he's emoting, like, "What in the... My son copulated with her?" And she's just so surprised at all of it. It adds to the humor of that scene immensely. And then, of course, in the end, "Go ahead, be crucified." When it comes to meaning of life, this is a funny character, but out of the ones that pop to mind that Jones played, it is my least favorite, and that is Mr., and I'm probably going to butcher this last name, Creosote. It's spelled Creosote. Creosote. Like I said, I haven't watched the movie in a while, so I don't remember if they pronounce it on film. But he's a big old fat guy. "I love my fat loves me." Which, just watching that whole scene is like one of those things you're like, ew, just because of how much he throws up. And the only part that got me really laughing with it was at the end when he blows up. But I'll be in all honesty, I like the after scene better with the punchline said by Idol's character. "At least I don't work for Jews," and getting the bucket dumped on her head by John Cleese before he looks at the camera. "I'm terribly sorry," as his Major Dean going, "I didn't know that we had a racist working here." I like that part of the gag a lot better than the part with Jones, and that's why, of all the characters from the films, definitely my least favorite of them. But he doesn't do a decent performance. It's just compared to the previous two ones, it's not as memorable. Now, in doing the research for this video, I actually found out something I didn't know, and that was apparently Terry Jones was also one of the writers for Labyrinth. That's right, the Jim Henson produced film Labyrinth, which means that technically Jones was a part of my childhood, just like Cleese and Idol were, but he was in a behind-the-scenes sense, whereas those two were in front of it. And it's been a while since I've seen Labyrinth, but you can kind of tell there's a little bit of that British sensibility with some of its humor, some of the fingerprints on there, but it's tempered with Jim Henson's trademarks. So it's essentially the Python's restrained a little bit, but it works. I haven't seen enough of Jones's other non-Python writing projects, so I can't really compare and contrast it too much. In conclusion, rest in peace, Terry Jones. It's sad you had to go out the way that you did, but I'll say at least you're not suffering anymore, and we got the memories on tape, on film, and as one of your compatriots once said, some things in life are bad. They can really make you sad. Other things just make you swear and curse. When you're chewing on life's gristle, don't grumble, give a whistle, and it will help things turn out for the best. And always look on the bright side of life. Always look on the light side of life. When life seems jolly rotten, there's something you've forgotten, and that's to laugh and smile and dance and sing. When you're feeling in the dumps, don't be silly chump. Just perk your lips and whistle, that's the thing.